We're here to speak for justice and humanity, for the legal and moral rights of 500,000 citizens of the state of California who, through no fault nor choice of their own, are mentally retarded.
For a parent of a retarded child, there was only two options. One, you kept the child home and dealt with the child as best you could. Or two, you would institutionalize the child. There was nothing in between. And as a practical matter, that pretty well meant that you institutionalized your child.
I really can't imagine to think that there was a time that there wasn't a support system in place and that people had the option of an institution or kind of go home and fend for yourself.
When we started, California was at a crossroads. There were people on a waiting list to go into state hospitals, which were, in those days, merely warehousing people in these large isolated institutions.
They made no discrimination between developmental disabilities, autism, or whatever. They all went into the same black hole.
My options, if I were a consumer, were pretty limited in 1965. I was not going to have a place to work. I was not going to have financial support. I might very well have ended out in an institution.
There were 13,000 people in them, and parents were seeking another way. And what they wanted was something that really, as far as we know in this country, had never been done before. And that was that children could live at home with their families, and adults could live in the community, and that services and supports would be provided to them in their home communities.
I remember having a conversation with the late John Thurman, who was an assemblyman in the Valley. And he said, well, you know, we voted for that Lanterman Act because I don't have time to talk to those mothers anymore. He said next to the NRA, those mothers were the toughest group he ever met. He said, I'd vote for anything. So, you know, those early people were, I mean, incredible, strong, committed, focused people, because for their lives to get better, something had to change.
Right at the beginning, if you read the act, it says the state of California has a responsibility to its developmentally disabled citizens and an obligation to them which it must discharge.
Well, the first thing I think that the Regional Center gave my parents was some hope. Early, you know, they were told to put him in an institution when he was 3. My parents went to visit Camarillo State Hospital and said they felt like he would be housed like an animal and that he would never live like that. And so I think having an institution like, you know, the Regional Center system gave them the sense that there was hope for him, that he didn't have to go to that alternative and that there was something in between.
We are very optimistic for her future. When I talk to friends who have very little experience with people with developmental disabilities, and I talk to them about Christina living on her own, Christina having a job, Christina having a boyfriend, getting married, things like that, they look at me like I'm crazy. And I don't blame them, because the memories of 30 years ago, 40 years ago, with people in institutions being hosed down twice a week, you know, walking the entire day in diapers at 40, are still vivid. And it's amazing how much we've overcome and how far we've come in these years.
I go to Lakewood High School, and I am in 10th grader. My name is a sophomore, and I'm great.
Years ago, the kids were very segregated, very isolated, and not getting any services. They were basically warehoused.
There was no public education, and we were working with legislators at that time to get education for people who were severely retarded.
Students were educated in basements of churches, they were in institutions, they were put away many times. The medical doctors are saying to parents, you know, your child's never going to equate to anything.
Oftentimes they were not even offered a school program until after age 6 or 8, and many children never got any school program at all because it was not an entitlement at that time.
I taught in a private school. There was a kind of a cottage industry in teaching kids because schools were allowed to exclude children. If they felt that they were going to be difficult to deal with, they could say, well, you're excluded. That left families on their own.
What they then called the Education for All Handicapped Act, Public Law 94-142. We now refer to that as IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, because it's been modified so many times. But basically it says that school is an entitlement for all children, not just typically developing children, but children with disabilities as well.
We used to work with the families and with the schools, and we promoted what we called mainstreaming then, so that our clients could be in the most normal situation possible, be in the least restrictive setting possible.
I think inclusion is a great idea. I also am a true believer that you need to have a continuum of support services for students because some students themselves don't want to be included. That doesn't mean you don't do that, but as students get older, you really have to listen to what they're saying and what they're advocating for themselves. I think inclusion is a wonderful idea. I think we've underestimated students with disabilities for a long time.
The schools have really become very good and very creative about offering lots of opportunities to bring children together. And of course, there's actually in classes where children with special needs are included with their normal peers in the same classroom all day long.
So it's up to us to figure out how to make your school and your education meaningful. And it's not just about access, it's about acquisition. Because you can say access and equality is really the key. It's really about acquisition as well, because we know that we can push a kid into a classroom and say, okay, now they're included, they're there. But it's not just physically being there, it's what you do with that. And that piece is sometimes tricky, and that's where Harbor Regional has been able to come in and support at home or support us at school.
The children that I know now that attend regular schools and interact with regular kids, we've seen them just do amazing things that we never thought that they were capable of.
You know, even if you look at kids' assessments on No Child Left Behind, people are absolutely floored with what students have been able to show that they know and can do, irrespective of what disability they have.
I mean, we never would have thought years ago that our clients would actually be going to college. And they do, and we have clients who've graduated from college.
The regional centers are really there to advocate for kids and families. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes the school districts need a regional worker to come in and say, you know what, you might think that, but this is the way we're going. And having that collaboration, because the needs of kids and families are so unique and so different, we tag team and we make sure that the kids and the families get what they need based on the collaboration. It's been a wonderful, wonderful collaboration. Some of the challenges for K-12 in the future, I think it's continuing the path that we're on, making sure that all kids count and that students are getting equitable access to education that allows them to acquire skills, that we're not just putting them in a classroom and saying, okay, there they are, they're included, that's fine. But I think because the needs of the students have changed over the years, I think the challenge for us is to make sure that we provide for those students.
I'm a dedicated worker. I'll come to work every day. If you hire me, you'll love having me here because I'll show you how much work I can do.
We're out in the community and I hold down a 40-hour job, 5 days a week, and other clients do that too. And we're just out there, and we like to have chances.
They were mostly segregated settings. By that I mean only disabled people worked there, and they would be on these assembly lines, and they would do mostly packaging kinds of work, and they were paid, but usually it was very sub-minimum wage. And today this is such a totally different picture. We need more employers and we need more jobs, but we have people who are in competitive work.
Well, certainly the regional center support structures and the vendors that they purchase for their clients have allowed them to go out into the community, work in the community. They have made contacts with corporations, large corporations, who have become supportive of hiring disabled people. And with the supportive services, if necessary, these people have jobs they go to every day.
We have people who are in jobs where they get supports. They can't really be out on their own totally, but if somebody is with them at least some of the time to help guide them, they're able to work and be paid minimum wage, above minimum wage.
I have a job coach, and before I was going from one job to another where I couldn't keep, and I couldn't understand how to solve problems in the workplace, or if something comes up. And then I have a job coach now that comes up and soothes me.
You know, I'm excited about the array of opportunities that people can have. If they want to find a job, you know, we have services, supported employment services, that can really work with them on an individual basis to identify what kind of job that's going to be and where we could find it and what kind of support they need to do it.
For this job that I have, they were able to get me into a computer skills learning class, and I learned about computers, and I actually use computers at work. So
in general, they're excellent workers because they love to be out on the job. They love to be with other people, and they love to do a job that they feel proud of.
That is a major fact that, you know, that he did learn gradually over the years. Today he's employed. He's been with the same company for 15 years.
And also it helps people with disabilities contribute to the general society. Because my son has a job, so he can spend and he can be part of the tax system. So I think that the people need to look at that and know that they're not just a drain on society, that they are contributing to society economically and socially.
We've made remarkable progress in the area of employment over these 40 years.
My dream was always living in a house, and I got that dream.
The parents started this whole system, this whole movement, because they were tired of their kids going to these institutions. They wanted them in the community. They said, you know, let's do something here.
Initially, housing wasn't an issue for our clients because the fact is they either lived at home with their families or they lived in an institution.
The housing world, when I got here, was basically institutions and large, I call them institutions in the community.
There were some licensed homes in the community. They weren't many. We had very few clients there.
40 beds, 12 beds, big.
Virtually none of our clients lived in what we now refer to as independent living or supported living, where they live in an apartment with supports as needed in order to be, you know, as independent as possible. So that really didn't exist back in those days. So we've come a tremendously long way. We have many options for living.
We have the regional center system, thank God for that, who will provide whatever it takes for a person to live in the community, whatever it takes.
She had a program where they had several people that would come during the course of the week, and they would help her with her food and take her shopping and all the various kinds of things, but still she had her privacy, her own place. She could do what she wanted.
The fact that now that regional centers are assisting to help fund a program for people to live independently in a home, that client wouldn't be able to do that and the family wouldn't have the resources either. And this allows them to get up in their own home in the morning and have what we take for granted. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful program.
If you have a key to your front door like you and I do, that's our house, right? That's where we live. We're in charge.
Some of them need just very little support, somebody to stop by once a week and make sure they're doing okay, but this was a service option that wasn't available at all 40 years ago. Now we have more difficulty. We have new problems that have arisen, and that has to do with the cost of housing. So affordable housing for those that can live on their own. Of course, our clients very often have very limited income. They need affordable housing, and there's not a lot of affordable housing out there, so this is our big challenge for the future. I really see dealing with the issue of housing that is affordable for our clients.
She is Josephine.
Oh, I haven't met Josephine.
If you go back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the idea of technology was sort of referred to in the regional center system as durable medical equipment. And it was kind of conceived as a device or equipment that was related directly to a medical need. And I think that there's a sea change in terms of how regional center as a system looks at that. When you're talking about, again, people that have developmental disabilities and families, I think that you're talking about communication, and you just alluded to it in terms of communication devices. I think you're also looking at educational and literacy issues, and then social recreation issues. Everyone uses technology in a different way. In terms of the field, when you say assistive technology, there's a whole large universe of tools that fall into that category. The idea of how are you going to use assistive technology, computer technology, to support personal development when you're talking about a developmental disability, I think that there's great promise.
People who didn't have a way of communicating, for example, and only 40 years ago, less than 40, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, we had people who didn't have a way of communicating, or it was very low technology, like using alphabet boards or picture communication. But today we have computers that can speak for people who can't speak for themselves.
I've seen people who had, significant social challenges in terms of being able to interact with someone face to face, who really ultimately were isolated on some level because their ability to communicate was challenged. And I can point to people now who use internet, and if you talk to them, they literally articulate for you that they're in India, they're in Europe, they're in South America, and they're in chat rooms, and they're actually integrating and talking to people.
Our clients have a huge amount of freedom that they never had, and we never dreamt of even just when we first got started.
It's only going to get, I think, more and more encouraging in terms of how this is all going to play out. I mean, for me at least, and I think for families and for everyone, the frustrating part of all this is that technology is so dynamic that it's changing as we speak, that it's a little intimidating for families to sort of, both on a practical level, but also on a financial level, to decide which tools to pick. And I think, again, that goes to the responsibility and the role of a regional center system, where what you can actually do is to have some opportunity for somebody to get some information and maybe some hands-on experience before you're even at a place where you're deciding what you might need to purchase. And I think that's, in the future, what I see as a huge challenge, and as a real role that the regional center can play, is just to sort of help families be better informed in terms of what's out there and how to apply it in terms of a goal.
Many people didn't quite know what to do with us after Luke was born, and suddenly through the regional center we had this network of support and a network of peers that we didn't have before. And I think having a child with a disability or with disabilities can be so profoundly isolating.
If you were someone with a developmental disability in the 40s or 1950s or even the 1960s, you had very few choices.
We had like our own little ecosystem of community providers that were solely dedicated to serving people with developmental disabilities, and regional centers which were solely dedicated to serving individuals with developmental disabilities. We were in the community, but we were not part of the community.
When I compare then and now, I mean, it was just so much more limited. And what we considered, for example, to be opportunities for independent living or job training, they were still, you know, much more separate, sort of parallel to the rest of the community, but not integrated the way they are now.
One of the wonderful benefits of the regional center is that we looked around and we said, well, if we're going to provide these services in the community, we need to develop them. And we need to talk with families about what would help them to care for their child or their adult child at home.
The families have diverse needs, and of course the culture in this area specifically is very diverse. And so what the regional center has been able to do is to listen and then add a program that helps that specific need. They've been very flexible.
I see our service plans now being much more individualized than they were in the past, even though in those days we did think they were individual plans. But there were just, you know, there are fewer opportunities that we thought about then, so the service plans looked a lot more alike than they do now, because now it's really just a picture of that individual.
What are your dreams? What are your wishes? Where do you want to go? And that's where we start. Quite different than what we talked about for 35 years when we talked about problems.
They also have much more control over their own destiny through personalized planning kinds of services. So I'd sum it up with really just a lot more choices and a lot more control over their own lives.
We have camps, we have after school, we have you know, assistance for the families to go and be educated on the different diagnoses and babysitting services so they can bring the family and they can go to the class. The coaching skills that are available for the clients. Daycares, specific one-on-one services with the clients at home.
There are support groups for families who are learning how to advocate for their children with the school system. There are support groups for different language and cultures. We provide preschool for children. We provide independent living skills, coordinating medical services, reviewing medical charts, doing medical examinations. I don't think there's a, if you sort of go through all the areas of a person's life, we touch every single one of them.
He was 100 days early exactly, 1 pound, and we lived in the NICU, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, for 158 days. The first 3 months nobody gave him a chance to survive whatsoever.
When I think back just in the area of medical technology, for example, I'm impressed because today, back when I first started and I went on rounds at Children's Hospital, when we had a little baby that was born at 2 pounds, we were sad because we felt that that child wouldn't make it. And today we see babies born at less than 1 pound, and we can do so much. These babies survive.
Realistically, I have no idea where Nicholas would be without Regional Center. We didn't even realize what challenges he would face. Therefore, we wouldn't know really what to provide him for services. As time went on, we started to understand what his challenges were in a better way. But, for instance, our regional caseworker came and looked at some of his challenges, which are very unique because he was a micro-preemie. And she actually brought up things that he needed that I would not have even understood existed.
Detecting things early makes a huge difference in every single area. It makes a huge difference for the child who ends up with a diagnosis that's a lifelong diagnosis, because they're getting intervention that will impact their long-term prognosis and well-being.
I know for a fact that a lot of therapists have told me that because they received early intervention, it's so noticeable when they work with them because they can see the difference that it's made.
The families are getting support much earlier. It's also helpful for the child, and this is the one I love to see, the one who does have a delay of some sort early on, but it's a minor delay. It's one that can be intervened upon and helped, and the child goes on and is no longer part of our system.
I basically help the other consumers or clients. I help them speak out for themselves, speak up for themselves, and speak up for their health, their well-being. I want them to have just as good experience as I did, if not better.
I think the thing that was different within the regional center system was not only coming up with diagnoses and making recommendations, but more important than anything else is being there as advocates. And I think that's this thing that we have achieved within our system.
A lot of clients, they don't know how to speak up for themselves. You know, I guess they're afraid to speak up because if they do, they might be like, oh, I shouldn't do that, I should be quiet.
And it's empowering individuals, empowering families to get access to services.
As we've evolved as a system, what's really changed is that now it's at the individual is at the heart of the decision making. With person-centered planning, they make the decisions about who's going to serve them and in what way.
I do speak out for the other clients here that really can't, you know, and that's why everybody likes me out on the board, because I do speak out if there's an issue that comes up and I don't like, and I let them know.
I live by myself right now, and I pay my own bills, pay my own expenses, I buy my own groceries, everything that an individual person does out in the world, that's what I do.
We like to be equal with everybody on the job, or be when we go into restaurants or go into department stores, and have a walker or in a wheelchair, or if we have problems speaking, that's our disability. A lot of people out there, they don't understand.
I think when I look at the world in which we're raising our son, it never feels like enough to me. It never feels as if society or people know what to do with people with disabilities. I mean, I'm happy when I see a film that has someone with a disability. I'm happy when I read an article that mentions someone with a disability. But I feel like we have so much farther to go as a society and just as people to accept people that are different. And to me, it's just another form of diversity.
The thing that people value the most from what they've told us, both adults with developmental disabilities and families with children, and they find the least of, is understanding, acceptance, inclusion in the community. This is something that emotionally resonates with them and with us. How do we go about achieving that?
Not long after we first started, we began to realize that it's not enough to be in the community. It's just not good enough to be in the community. We need to be part of the community.
And I don't think it's the regional center so much as it is our whole society. And looking at other as us. And we just don't have that ability yet. And it needs to happen in our education system. It needs to happen in our medical system. It needs to happen in our service delivery system. But it's individuals who make the difference, and I think we're on our way, but we have a way to go.
If you talk to kids who have grown up and had contact with disabled kids, it's clear to me that the people who benefit most are actually the non-disabled kids.
That's where understanding, acceptance, empathy really begin, before children get older.
It's become so much more common, I think, in all of our communities to have people of all ages with developmental disabilities just be really involved in the community in different ways, attending preschools, attending the schools, being in the same child care setting as kids without special needs, you know, all the way up to being on a job at a place of business that you go and you know, you go to a restaurant or you go to a store and you're being served by somebody with developmental disability.
They belong in the classroom. They belong in our neighborhoods, in the house next door, through supported living. They belong in our shops, you know, behind the counter, telling us, good morning, what do you need, through supported employment. That has been the biggest change in the last 15 years.
I think turning 40 is a big milestone, whether you're an individual, whether you're an organization or a system like the regional center system. And I think if you're thoughtful at all, and I like to think of us as a thoughtful service system, then you need to stop and take stock.
Where's this thing going? This is a $3.2 billion ship. This thing is huge.
One of the things that really concerns me, it's not simply a challenge, but I worry about it a lot, is whether or not this incredible system that we have developed that has admirably served so many hundreds of thousands of people over the years is actually sustainable into the future.
We need to get a rudder and we need to say we're going wherever we're going and then put it together and make sure our maps say, yep, this is the right way and here's how we're going to get there. And it's up to us, the present leaders, to do that.
In every area, I think I see challenges for the future. We're not finished.
The micromanagement of the whole regional center system by government has turned them away from the community-based service that they used to be. That allowed them to focus on their community and the special needs of the individual communities of the individual regional centers.
So we need to get rid of some of these constraints and some of these rigid rules and regulations that we live by.
I see as a real challenge term limits in the legislature. We aren't having any more Frank Lantermans who stay here for 28 years and really shepherd this system. With high turnover, we've got to continually go out and meet those new legislators and educate them about the needs of persons in the developmental services field.
Parents, I think, have lost control of our system. That's the one thing they don't realize.
The families, unfortunately, today have not had to fight for the services. It's like plugging in a lamp. And all of a sudden, everything is there. The services are there. And so it's more difficult to get people to serve on boards and on committees because it's like, well, it's all there. Why do I have to fight for it?
I think a few years ago when the Lanterman Act was in danger of being cut down or destroyed, I think hopefully everyone really got a sense of we cannot take this for granted, ever.
Regional center is a blessing. We need to make sure that it stays strong and that it's funded properly. But in order to accomplish that, it requires involvement on the part of parents.
The parents, if they united in the state of California like they really should, they would have an incredible amount of power. Not just the board parents, I'm just talking about the 200,000+ parents we have. My God, what a political force that would be.
And I think that we have to continue to make sure that there's grassroots movements among families and especially among the people that are consumers of services to make sure that these services and these opportunities in this legislation does not go away.
And we need more parents' participation. And as a parent, more we learn what is going on in the system. We can't ignore and to participate, and we should really work together for this system go forward.
I think another real challenge for the system is to do some serious succession planning. If you look at our 21 regional centers and look at who the directors of those centers are, most of them have been there for years and years and years. And this is a good, because we have tremendous talented people with a lot of wisdom, but they're all getting to that age where they can consider retirement. And I worry whether we have the leaders coming up and groomed behind them to take their places.
I think the other notion of leadership today that's different from when our system first started. When you look at it, it was primarily parents, a few visionary professionals, and legislators. I think in those days, we really did not have this concept that people with developmental disabilities could be leaders. And they are. And they're perfectly capable of leading. And we need to focus on developing leaders among people with developmental disabilities. And I think the other thing that we've come to in recognizing that is critical if we are going to maintain the local control and the local commitment to this community-based program is we need to develop leaders in the community. And by that I mean people who don't otherwise have a connection to the regional center system because they don't have a family member. I think that is extremely critical for us going into the future. If we're going to keep this vision alive, if we're truly going to get connected and be part of our community.
This system, the regional center system here, is the best of any I've ever experienced in the country. And I've got relatives that have problems in other states, and to see them fight for services for their youngsters when we can almost just walk in the door and they're available.
The regional center was a brilliant concept when it was conceived, and I think it continues to be a truly extraordinary concept. I see it as being effective today as it was when it was conceived 40 years ago.
There are almost unlimited opportunities for persons with developmental disabilities, and we shouldn't put up any barriers by our own goals that are set too low. We need to keep raising that bar.
And if you dream and you have visions for the future and you just give people opportunities, people just rise to the occasion.
We're really part of this vibrant, very generous community, which I cannot imagine my life without these people.
I want to say thank you so much. Regional Center, you have truly, helped my son be put in a level playing field, and you have truly helped our family integrate.
My daughter, Erica, is 19 years old now, so I hope that she would be able to work and live a very happy life.
When I got the diagnosis, I felt so alone. But then when I came to the regional center, I felt like there was a place I belonged, and I was no longer alone. I know that they wouldn't be the miracle that they are now if it hadn't been for the regional center.
Regardless of the severity of the disability, there is a life out there for our children. They are very fulfilling lives, and they are very fulfilling for ourselves too. So it is going to be okay.